Have you ever had a moment like this? Nothing is obviously wrong, everything on the outside still looks fine. But inside there is a very faint feeling you can't explain. Not fear, not clear anxiety, just a thin sense of unease, like a signal you can't name but you know it's there. And then you do what most of us do. You ignore it. You tell yourself you're overthinking, that you're just being weak, that you need to be stronger and keep moving as if nothing is happening. But there is a truth no one tells you. Not every small feeling is random. Not every uneasiness is weakness. There are moments when you don't realize that it's not your thoughts, but the way God is trying to speak to you. And if you're like me, you may have heard him very clearly before, but you didn't recognize it. And the question is not whether God is speaking. The question is, how many times have you missed him? I'm not asking you that lightly. I'm asking as someone who has lived inside that answer, because there was a time I thought God was silent with me. I prayed but heard nothing. I waited but there were no clear signs. I saw others say they felt God, but I didn't. And deep inside, I started to believe that maybe he wasn't speaking to me. But that wasn't the truth. The truth is I did hear, many times. I just didn't recognize it. There were very small moments, not loud, not obvious, no voice coming from the sky, just a slight feeling when I was about to do something, a hesitation that was hard to explain, a fleeting thought, very quick, like a whisper that disappears instantly if I don't pay attention. And I didn't pay attention. I called it hesitation, I called it weakness, I called it fear, and I forced myself to keep going, because I believed that if I felt uncertain, it meant I needed to be stronger, not stop. I remember once I stood before a decision that looked right on the surface, a good opportunity, a door that opened easily, no reason to refuse. But inside me there was a very strange feeling, not fear, not worry, just no peace. And the thing is, I noticed it. I knew that feeling wasn't normal. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't stop to ask why. I didn't stop to listen. I just tried to explain it away. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was making things complicated, that if I didn't move forward, I would miss the opportunity. And I stepped forward. After some time, everything started to change. Not immediately, not a clear collapse, but a gradual shift. I began to feel heavier, more tired. Inside was no longer calm, and I didn't understand why. I prayed more. I tried to fix everything, but the more I tried, the more distant I felt. Until one day I had to stop, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. And in that silence, I began to look back. I didn't look at the wrong decision. I looked at the moment before it. The very small moment I had ignored, the moment when I felt no peace, but I kept going. And that's when I realized something I could never forget. God was not silent with me. He spoke. He just didn't speak in the way I expected. He didn't shout. He didn't force. He didn't clearly stop me. He simply withdrew the peace. A very gentle signal, but very real. And I chose to ignore it. That changed completely how I looked at my life. I began to see it wasn't the only time. There were many moments like that. Times I felt uneasy, but kept going. Times I had a very clear thought, but pushed it away. Times I knew, but didn't want to face it. And each time like that, I moved a little further away from the guidance. Not because God left me, but because I didn't recognize him when he was very near. If you are listening to this, you might be thinking about a moment in your life, a decision, a path, a time when you felt something wasn't right, but you kept going. I don't need you to answer out loud, I just need you to be honest with yourself. Have you ever felt that? Because if you have, there is a possibility you may have never considered. It's not that you lack faith, it's not that you're not sensitive enough, it's that you didn't recognize how God was speaking to you. And this goes deeper than you think. Because the problem is not only that you missed it, the problem is you might still be missing it right now without even realizing it. And for you to understand that more clearly, I need to tell you a story. Not a story to teach you something, but a story that might be more like you than you think. His name was Daniel, a very ordinary person if you looked from the outside. He had a stable job, a clear plan for the future, and most importantly, he believed in God. Not in a loud way, not in a showy way, but a quiet faith, like the way many people carry it in their hearts. Daniel was impulsive. He thought carefully before making decisions. He prayed before important steps. And he always believed that if a door opened easily, then maybe it was a sign from God. Until one day, an opportunity appeared. It was a new position, a big step forward in his career. Everything seemed right. Higher salary, better environment. Everyone around him said he should take it. Even his family saw it as an obvious choice. And Daniel thought the same. He prayed. He asked God for guidance. But nothing special happened. No clear sign, no specific answer. Only a very slight feeling he couldn't explain. Not fear, not worry, just not complete peace. It wasn't strong enough to make him stop, but it wasn't weak enough to completely ignore. It stayed there quietly, like a whisper he didn't want to listen to too closely. And that was when Daniel started doing what many people do. He looked for reasons to explain it away. He told himself that change always comes with discomfort, that stepping out of your comfort zone is supposed to feel like that. That if he waited until he felt completely at peace, he might never go anywhere. It sounded very reasonable, and because it was reasonable, he believed it. Daniel accepted the job. The first few weeks went fairly smoothly, no major problems, no clear signs that he had made a mistake. Everything was still under control, and if you looked from the outside, you would think he had made the right decision. But inside, something began to change. Not immediately, not a collapse, but a gradual shift, a kind of fatigue he couldn't explain, a heaviness every time he woke up, an emptiness creeping into moments where he once felt peace. Daniel began to pray more. He asked God to fix everything. He asked for peace to return. He wondered if he had done something wrong. But the more he prayed, the more it felt like he was speaking into empty space. Not because God wasn't listening, but because Daniel was trying to find the answer after he had already stepped past the signal. One evening, he sat alone in a quiet room. No noise, no one around, and for the first time in a long while, he stopped running. He didn't ask for anything, he didn't try to explain anything, he just sat there and remembered. Not remembering the decision, but remembering the moment before the decision happened. That feeling came back very clearly, that slight feeling he once had, that lack of peace he had tried to name, something else. And this time, he didn't rush to push it away. He looked straight at it, and for the first time, he asked a question he had been avoiding. What if that wasn't fear? What if that was how God was speaking? That question didn't come with condemnation, it came with a very deep silence. And in that silence, Daniel began to understand something no one had clearly told him before. God does not always speak through big things. He does not always close doors clearly. He does not always stop you when you are going the wrong way. Sometimes he does just one very small thing. He takes away the peace, not to punish, but to warn. And if you don't recognize that, you can keep walking forward without even realizing that you have stepped away from his guidance. Daniel did not collapse at that moment. He didn't have a sudden turning point, but something in him changed forever. He began to look back at his life in a different way. He started to realize that it wasn't the only time he had felt that way. There were other decisions, other moments where he had the same feeling and ignored it. And each time like that, he drifted a little further away. Not because God left him, but because he didn't recognize him when he was very near. Daniel's story is not special. It is ordinary in a way that is almost unsettling, because if you are honest, you may have been in that very story yourself. Not with the same job, not the same situation, but the same feeling, the same moment, the same choice. You felt it. You knew, even if only for a very brief second, but you didn't stop. And what makes this story important is not that Daniel was wrong, it is how he realized he was wrong. Because what he realized might change the way you look back at everything in your life. And if you are willing to face that, then the next part will not just be another story, it will be the truth. What Daniel realized was not a new idea, it was not a method, nor was it a principle you could write down and apply. It was a truth he had heard before, but never truly understood. God does not always speak with words, and perhaps he rarely speaks in the way you are expecting. We often expect something clear, a strong sign, an unmistakable answer. We think that if God wants to guide us, he will do it in a way we cannot miss. But that is not how he usually works. Not because he lacks the power to do so, but because he is looking for something else in you. Not force, but sensitivity. Not control, but listening. And because of that, the way he speaks is often very gentle. So gentle that you can ignore it if you are not paying attention. So gentle that you can call it by another name, but still real enough that if you stop, you will know. Daniel began to understand that what he called a feeling of unease was not a problem to overcome. It was a signal to be listened to. Not every uneasiness comes from fear. Some uneasiness comes from misalignment. Not every silence is the absence of God. Some silence is how he waits for you to stop. And this completely changed how he saw the small moments in life. Before, he only paid attention to big things, important decisions, clear turning points. But now, he began to notice very small things, a fleeting thought, a slight feeling when he was about to say something, a hesitation when he was about to step into a new path. The things he once considered insignificant were actually where God was often present. Not loud, not forceful, just a very subtle adjustment. Like when you drift slightly off course and you feel something isn't right. No one tells you, there are no signs, but you know. The question is, do you stop to adjust? Or do you keep going and convince yourself that everything is fine? What Daniel realized was not that he was wrong once, but that he had become used to ignoring small signals. And that is what makes it dangerous, because you don't have to fight against God to go the wrong way. You just have to not listen, not with your ears, but with your attention, because the voice of God in your life does not always come as a complete sentence. Sometimes it comes as a loss, the loss of peace when you are about to step into something that does not belong to you, the loss of clarity when you try to force yourself down the wrong path, the loss of inner stillness when you are moving against what you know is true. And if you don't recognize that, you will do what Daniel did. You will try to fix everything after you have ignored the signal. You will ask for guidance while you have already stepped outside of it. You will search for answers when you once had them but did not recognize them. And this is not meant to make you afraid. It is meant to wake you up. Because if you have missed it before, it does not mean you have lost everything. But it does mean you need to change how you listen. Not by waiting for something bigger, but by starting to notice something smaller. Not by forcing yourself to be certain, but by being honest with what you are feeling. Because the truth is, you have felt it before. You have had moments when you knew, even if you could not explain it. And maybe you called it fear, maybe you called it weakness. But if you look back honestly, you will begin to see something. There is a pattern, a repetition, a way that God has always been speaking to you, but you did not recognize it. And if you begin to see that, you will not be able to live the same way anymore. Because now the question is no longer, is God speaking? But what will you do when you begin to realize that he has always been speaking? And this is where everything becomes more personal. No longer Daniel's story, no longer my experience, but yours. Because there is something you need to face, not about the past, but about right now. I don't want you to just understand this, I want you to face it. because there is a huge difference between hearing a truth and letting that truth touch your own life. Right now, as you are hearing this, you may have already started remembering something. No need to try, no need to search, it just appears. A decision, a relationship, a path you once stepped into, and before you stepped you felt it. Not clear, not loud, not strong enough to force you to stop, but real enough for you to know something wasn't right. And you kept going. I'm not saying this to condemn you. I'm saying this because I have been there. But there is a question you cannot avoid. Not, why did that happen? But, why did you ignore it? You can say you weren't sure. You can say you didn't understand. You can say you didn't want to miss the opportunity. But deep inside, if you are honest, you will see something. You felt it. You knew, even if only for a very brief moment, and you chose not to stop. Not because you didn't hear, but because you didn't want to hear. Because if you listened, you would have to change. If you listened, you would have to let go of something. If you listened, you would have to follow a direction you were not ready for. And that is where everything becomes real. We don't miss God just because he speaks too softly. We miss him because we don't want what he is saying. That is the truth I had to face. It wasn't that I lacked faith. It wasn't that I didn't pray enough. It was that there were moments I knew what was right, but I didn't want to choose it. And if you pause for a moment, you will see that in yourself. There are things you are still holding on to, even though you know they are not right. There are places you are still staying, even though you know you no longer have peace. There are decisions you are delaying because you are afraid to face the truth. You don't need anyone to tell you that. You already know. But you are doing what all of us do. You are delaying. You tell yourself you need more time. You say you need more certainty. You say you will listen when you are more ready. But the truth is, you have already heard. You just haven't wanted to respond. And what makes this dangerous is not that you missed it once. It's that you are forming a habit of not listening, a habit of explaining away small signals, a habit of continuing even when there is no peace inside you anymore. And over time, you will not just miss one decision, you will begin to lose the ability to recognize, not because God stopped speaking, but because you have become used to not responding. I'm not saying this to scare you, I'm saying this so you will stop. Not tomorrow, not when things are clearer, but right now. Because maybe, right now, there is something in your life that is not at peace. Something you have felt many times. Something you have tried to explain away. Something you are continuing, even though you know you should stop. I don't need to know what it is, you know. And the question is not whether you can continue. The question is, will you keep pretending you don't recognize it, or will you stop and face it? Because the moment you choose to face it is not the moment you lose something. It is the moment you begin to return to guidance. And if you are ready for that, then the next part is not the end. It is where you begin to be healed. If you have come this far, I believe one thing. You are not just listening to a video, you are facing yourself. And that is not easy. Because realizing that you have missed something always comes with a weight. Not because you are weak, but because you are starting to see more clearly. And when you see clearly, you can no longer pretend like before. But listen to me slowly. The fact that you have missed it is not the end. God does not stop speaking to you just because you failed to recognize him once or many times. He does not leave you just because you chose the wrong path. He does not distance himself from you to punish you. If that were true, you would not be sitting here, hearing these words. The truth is, you are still being guided, not because you have done everything right, but because he has never stopped being near you. And maybe this time you are beginning to recognize it, not through a big sign, not through something obvious, but through a very gentle touch within you. A pause, a stillness, a moment when you no longer want to run. And that is exactly where healing begins. Not when you understand everything, but when you are willing to be honest. Not when you have all the answers, but when you stop avoiding the question. So right now, I don't want you to try to do anything. I just want you to stop. If you can, close your eyes for a moment, not as a ritual, but so you are not distracted, so you can be alone with what is happening inside you. And if you are ready, say this. You don't need to say it out loud, just make it real. God, I have heard, but I did not recognize. I have felt, but I ignored it, not because you were not speaking, but because I was not listening. Today, I am not asking you to speak louder. I am asking you to make me more sensitive. Help me recognize the small things. Help me not explain away what I know is true. Help me stop when I no longer have peace. And if I am going the wrong way, do not let me continue easily. Even if I do not understand everything, I still want to follow your guidance. Amen. You do not need to feel anything immediately. You do not need a big change right now. What matters is you stopped. And sometimes that is the first step to return. If what you just heard touched you, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a line below. It doesn't need to be long, just real. I choose to listen. And if you want to continue this journey where you learn to recognize the things you once missed, you can stay with me on the God Heals prayer channel, not to hear more, but to begin recognizing more clearly. Because there is one thing you need to remember, not to fear, but to stay awake. God has never been silent. There were only times you did not recognize that he was speaking.